What's going on, everyone? This is Raw and Unfiltered with David Elliott. And in today's video, we're going to be continuing on with our three-part video series. And we're going to be looking at part two. Part two, in this video, we're going to be discussing how to pre-qualify a seller finance opportunity. Yes, that is right. We are going to pre-qualify the underwriting. So if you have not seen part one, and if you have not seen the prior videos illustrating how to classify a property based off of a grade score, A, B, C, or an F, I highly recommend that you take a look at those videos. That will help you out in part two of this video series. So let's continue on. We're going to pull up the property. And we can see here that it is currently listed on market. Now, this property here was brought to us from PropStream. PropStream allows us to filter out potential leads that may fit a certain criteria that we are looking for. And in this case, we are looking for a seller finance opportunity. And so PropStream had indicated to us that this property here may make a great candidate as a seller finance deal. And so what we're going to look at is we're going to look at the purchase price here currently listed, and we're going to take a look at the estimated rental comps. Now, we don't need to do a full rental comparison yet. We don't need to comp out the rents quite yet. That is something that we would finalize during final underwriting. What we want to do is pre-qualify the underwriting and see, do we have a lead? Do we have a lead that is worth pursuing? Do we have a lead in which if we were to present the creative terms to the seller, is the seller willing and going to be engaged with the creative terms that we present to them? Because we certainly don't want to be presenting terms to them that aren't intrigued, right? Sellers want to be intrigued by offers made to them. And three, we're going to make sure that this cash flows. So we're going to pre-qualify the numbers for this property. So we're basically going to be looking just at the rent value. That's all we're going to need. And based off of the projected rental estimates, we're going to know right off the bat if this is going to cash flow. So let's take a look. We're going to scroll down here to Zillow, and we're going to see what the rental projections are. Now, it looks like this is a very strong neighborhood. We're getting about $100 per 100 square feet of the premises. So Zillow is saying that we could probably rent this out between $2,600 to $2,700 a month. Now, that is pretty hefty. That's actually really great. I don't think I'm going to stick with this $2,600. I want to be a little bit more pessimistic, as we are pre-qualifying the underwriting here, and we want to see if this is actually a deal. If it's not a deal, then we need to move on. So we're going to take this in a little bit more of a pessimistic point of view. We're going to say that the rent is going to be $2,400 a month. Always try to go slightly less than what Zillow rent estimate will give you. There are other service providers such as Rentometer or RentCast. Always put your rent value slightly less, because if it cash flows on a slightly less rental estimate, then what you're basically setting up a better opportunity for you in the long run should you get the number that you are truly projecting. So we're going to take $420, and we're going to take a rental estimate of $2,400 a month, and we're going to plug that into our pre-qualifying calculator. So let's do that right now. Let me just verify real quick that that was indeed the purchase price. It was not. And we are going to look at the best case scenario that the seller can receive conventionally. So if you haven't seen the prior videos as to why we are comparing our creative terms versus a best case scenario on a conventional point of view, I highly suggest that you watch the previous videos. we are going to say that the seller is going to receive a full ask price of $420. And we're going to give the seller a best case scenario that they are going to have a sales fee of 3% commission towards the listing agent and 1% towards closing costs, totaling 4%. Now we're going to take a look at the total encumbrance on the property. So let's pull that up. I actually took a screenshot earlier. And so here it is. This is the property address. We can see that the mortgage balance is 0, and there were no liens associated on the property either. So this property is actually free and clear. So this would be 100% seller finance. So we're to come over here and we can see that it's already baselined at $0 for the encumbrance. So we won't touch that. And just from simple calculations, we can see that the seller is going to walk away with over $400,000 at closing. Best case scenario. If the seller were to receive $420,000 at their full ask price with a 3% agent commission and 1% towards closing costs, they're looking at a best case scenario of $400,000 received at closing. That's pretty significant. Now, after capital gains of 15% and Uncle Sam is paid, seller's really making about $340,000, but that's still quite significant. Well, let's go down here and we're going to put in the 3% agent commissions as this was on market. And we can see that the agent commission is going to be about $12,600. So that is what the agent can expect to make. Now we're going to come all over here to the right-hand side because we want to structure creative terms via seller finance. So we can see on the left-hand side that the seller's got a pretty decent, scenario, which they can net quite a bit of money at closing. And what we want to do is we want to incentivize the offers that the seller is receiving. So we're going to go well over asking price. We're going to put a cap on the current ask price of 10%, and we're going to pay the seller $40,000 over asking price. Now, the reason why I'm capping it at 10% is because most properties across the U.S. are averaging anywhere between 8 and 12% year over year market appreciation. 10% is just a safe number to be at. We don't want to go exceedingly high over the purchase price, as that's going to artificially inflate the market area. We're going to artificially inflate square footage, and it's going to create an issue when it comes time to do some sort of cash out refinance. You're going to have to allow the market in that particular area to catch up to what you paid for the property, because the current market value would be less than what you actually paid for. So be very careful with how far above you are going, how far above you are purchasing over the current ask price of the seller. At 10%, you are in the safe zone. And so at $460,000, $40,000 over asked, that would be a pretty safe bet, and you won't have to worry too much. So based off of these values, we're going to give them 10% down just to start off. So at 10% down, that would be $46,000. And I want to incentivize the seller. So I'm going to come up to 12% on my down payment. So let's go up to, let's say, $55,000. Okay, we're pretty much there. So at $55,000, we can see that the down payment received by the seller will be about 12%. Now, I don't want to go past 12%, so this is going to be my cutoff. We're going to come over here to the sales fee now, and we're going to put in 3.7, 3% towards the agent commission, and 0.7 for closing costs, as this is creative, and closing costs for creative deals will always be slightly cheaper than that through the conventional method. So we can already see a big difference in terms of the agent commission. If you were to present this to your seller or to an on-market agent, you could simply take a screenshot of this And the agent will see right off the bat that they're going to make $12,600 through a conventional method, or they could make $13,800 through a creative method. The choice is theirs. But they're definitely going to be incentivized to work with you as they want to get paid out on the higher agent commission. And so we're going to come back to this chart, and we can see here that the tax rate is at 0%. We're going to leave it at 0% because we are deferring capital gains. And the reason why we're allowed to defer capital gains is because there is a seller carryback of $405,000. So because all the proceeds have not been paid out to the seller, according to the IRS tax code, the seller will be allowed to defer capital gains. They will not have to pay, they will not be subject to be paying 15% or even 20% at the time of closing or at the time of sale. Now, if we were to stick with these numbers, and let's say we wanted to assign our deal, and we had a standard assignment fee of $10,000, let's take a look at what our estimated deal projections would be as for the end buyer and for the wholesaler. So we're going to go back to Zillow, and we're going to pull up the listing, and we can see that the rent was at $2,648 a month. We're going to be slightly pessimistic, and we're going to say it's $2,400 a month. Okay, great. So we can see that even through a pessimistic point of view, we are going to net approximately $400 net. And our cash on cash is not going to be the absolute best, but this is going to differentiate depending on what your assignment fee is and any types of repairs that are needed with the property. So, your cash on cash is going to fluctuate up or down. But we can see here that we are going to net, and that is the most important thing, seeing that we are going to net $400 after all expenses. And so this is based off of a worst case scenario. So even during a worst case scenario, I know that this is a lead worth pursuing. Now, there is a benefit to this being seller finance. The benefit to it being seller finance is that you, as the buyer, as the investor, or as the wholesaler, have power. Your power is in the negotiation aspect of how much are you willing to pay the seller every single month. When you're doing a seller finance deal, you, in most cases, 90% of the time, are looking to give them some sort of monthly payment, whether it's 10% of the gross rent, 30% of the gross rent, 50% of the gross rent. That's really up to you. But the lower you're able to negotiate that monthly payment to them, the higher your cash flow, the higher your cash on cash percentage. So with seller finance, it is a beautiful thing because you have that type of control. In subject to deals, you don't have that type of control. You are required to pay the monthly payment, that of the lender. So if you don't make that payment, you will be foreclosed on. The same could be said for seller finance deals, but the difference is you have the power at the very beginning to initiate how much of a monthly payment you are willing to pay them. And so a property such as this is a great property to go after, especially it being that the rent value is just so high. So maybe another bonus for you as the wholesaler or as the buyer is see if you can find a property that's netting you about $100 per 100 square feet of the property. If you can find something like that, you have a solid seller finance deal. And so this one passes the test. This passes pre-qualifying the underwriting, and now you can have a conversation with the agent or with the seller directly and just talk about more specific details. Once those details have been accepted by both parties, you can then go through a full 10 to 15 minute underwriting. But at least now we know that this property will work, we will cash flow. It's going to do actually quite well on the net cash flow and the cash on cash percentage. So this concludes part 2 of 3.